In 1845, Ireland was still under the rule of the British Empire. At that time, the country was struck by one of the worst famines in European history. Crops failed due to a fungal disease, and a deadly fever spread across the land, killing at least 2 million people. The situation only grew worse because of the policies enforced by British landlords, which offered no relief to struggling farmers. Taxes remained unbearably high, while potatoes and other crops rotted before they could even be harvested. Many families were forced out of their homes by police for failing to pay rent, and countless people died on the streets. Amid this devastation, a man named Martin O'Feeney finally returns to his village after being forced to fight for the British in Afghanistan. Along the way, he sees firsthand how badly his people have suffered, as if the British government has completely abandoned them. When he arrives home, he is met with a heartbreaking reality. His house has been turned into a pig shelter by his own uncle Bertla, who tells him that his mother died a year ago. His brother Arthur was executed after stabbing a landlord's agent who had come to seize his crops and evict his family. Even worse, Bertla himself works as a bailiff for the landlords, and all he can offer Martin is a hollow apology for failing to protect their family. With nowhere else to turn, Martin visits Anya, his brother's widow, and brings what little bread he has to share with her starving children. Not long after, her eldest son, Michael, returns home after stealing potatoes just to feed his siblings. Michael resents Martin deeply, seeing him as a traitor for serving the British Army. What he does not realize is that Martin had no choice back then. He did it to keep his mother alive. Still, Martin tries to help by giving them money and suggesting they leave everything behind and start a new life in America. The next day, as they prepare to visit his mother's grave, Anya explains how their crops suddenly withered. The potatoes rotted in the soil before harvest, leaving them with nothing. Food has become nearly impossible to find, yet the landlords and their agents continue to evict anyone who cannot pay. Homes are torn down, and whatever little grain or potatoes remain are taken by force. Then comes the fever, claiming even more lives across the already suffering community. Soon after, Anya and her children are forcibly evicted by British police and a bailiff named Cronin, acting under orders from the landlord who wants the land cleared. The officers show no compassion for the people they are throwing into the cold. Martin arrives just in time, but is immediately blocked by the police. Anya and her children refuse to leave, because that small hut is the only shelter they have against the freezing weather. Martin desperately calls out to them, promising to take them to America, but he is struck down by the officers. In the end, Anya has no choice but to step outside, watching helplessly as her home is torn apart. This is Black 47. Meanwhile, Sarsfield orders his men to capture Michael for stealing potatoes the day before, but the situation turns deadly when Michael stabs a tax officer and is immediately shot. His death leaves Anya devastated, mourning the loss of her eldest son. At the same time, Martin is dragged into a police station for interfering with the authorities. Inside, he remains silent, holding back the anger that has been building inside him. As famine and disease continue to take lives, he sees clearly that the people in power have no compassion left for the Irish. Eventually, a commander questions him about the weapon he is carrying. That moment becomes the breaking point. Overcome with rage, Martin lashes out and brutally kills the officers one by one. After wiping out the police, he sets the station on fire and disappears into the night. By morning, snow has begun to fall. Martin returns to search for Anya and her children, only to find the roof of their home already torn apart. Inside, it is too late. They have all frozen to death, huddled together under a single blanket. Martin stands there in silence, taking in the loss. Then, using a kitchen knife, he treats the gunshot wound in his arm. In that moment, he makes a decision. This is no longer about survival. It is about revenge. Elsewhere in England, a prisoner named Hannah is offered conditional freedom by a military commander. Once a soldier, Hannah had been imprisoned for killing captives. Now, freedom is within reach, but only if he agrees to track down the man responsible for burning a police station in Ireland. Martin O'Feeney. Hannah knows Martin well. They once fought side by side in Afghanistan. At first, he refuses the mission, but the commander makes it clear that refusal will lead to execution. With no real choice left, Hannah is forced to accept. Back in Ireland, Martin heads toward Bertla's house, dragging along one of his uncle's pigs from his old home. Not long after, Bertla arrives and is shocked to find Martin waiting inside. Martin is furious, unable to accept that his own uncle chose to serve the landlords instead of protecting his own family. He pulls out a knife and demands to know which English judge ordered his brother's execution. Bertla reveals that the judges and police all answer to the landlords. Then, in a sudden twist, he attempts to kill Martin himself, but his weapon has no ammunition. Without hesitation, Martin strikes first and kills his own uncle. The story then shifts to Hannah and Pope, who arrive in Ireland to hunt down Martin. They are accompanied by a young soldier named Hoobs, who takes care of their horses as they travel. At the same time, Martin appears at a courtroom where an Irish man is being tried for stealing a sack of wheat from a landlord's storage, simply to feed his starving family. Despite the desperation behind his actions, the man is sentenced to 6 months of forced labor without pay, building a port in England. Not long after the trial ends, Judge Bolton is startled to find Martin standing inside his chamber. The confrontation is brief and deadly. Soon, Hannah, Pope, and Hoobs arrive at the courthouse, only to discover the judge hanging lifeless inside the building. From there, they head toward a nearby village after hearing that Bertla, a landlord's agent, has also been killed. Along the way, they pass starving villagers whose bodies are reduced to skin and bone, their harvest long gone to taxes. When they reach Bertla's house, they find his body with a gruesome twist. His head has been replaced with a pig's head. Hannah searches the place for clues and finds that Bertla's money is still untouched, confirming that this was not a robbery. He tries to question the locals, but they cannot understand English. Soon after, a man named Connor approaches them and leads them to Martin's old home. There, inside the pig pen, they find Bertla's severed head. Hannah recognizes the method immediately. It resembles a punishment once used in Afghanistan against traitors, something Martin may have learned during the war. That night, Martin makes his way to a tent where free food is being distributed by English church volunteers. While the villagers are still singing before the meal, Martin walks straight in and takes a bowl of potato soup. His actions shock everyone present. When confronted, Martin refuses to wait. To him, these people are already on the brink of death, and feeding them matters more than ritual. He forces the situation, pushing aside the resistance and urging the starving crowd to eat first. Not far away, Hannah, Hoobs, and Pope set up camp and rest by a small fire. During the night, Hannah reflects on the past. He remembers how Martin once saved him during a battle in Afghanistan, surrounded by enemies. In his eyes, Martin was the greatest soldier he had ever known. The next day, Hannah and his group are unsure which path to take. When they reach a crossroads, Connor suggests that Martin might be heading to the house of Mr. Cronin, the same bailiff who had evicted Martin's mother, Anya, and her children. Without wasting time, they move out toward that location. At the same time, Cronin is at home calling for his men, but no one answers. Suspicious, he heads into the storage area and finds 2 of his men already dead. Moments later, Martin reveals himself. Inside the warehouse, Martin sees piles of crops that were taken from starving villagers, food that Cronin had seized without any concern for the people left to suffer without it.
They have money.
Not long after, Hannah and Pope arrive and are immediately fired upon by Martin. Pope manages to survive as the others take positions and prepare to surround him. Hoobs fires at the door, and moments later, Martin suddenly steps out, catching them off guard. For a brief moment, he pauses when he sees Hannah and Pope. They order Hoobs to shoot, but he hesitates, unable to pull the trigger. That hesitation gives Martin the chance to escape, leaving Pope furious at the young soldier. Elsewhere, Cronin is found dead, buried within the very grain he had taken from the villagers. Realizing that the victims are all tied to the landlord's system, Hannah and the others begin to understand Martin's next move. His true target is Lord Kilmichael, the powerful landlord behind it all. They quickly set off to pursue him. That night, while everyone is resting, Martin moves silently through the darkness and approaches Hannah, holding him at gunpoint. In that quiet moment, he reveals the weight of everything he has seen. He fought for England in Afghanistan, but when he returned, England showed no care for his homeland. His people have frozen to death, starved, and been crushed under unbearable taxes. To him, there is a painful double standard. When he kills, he is called a murderer. But when England kills, it is called war. Hannah is left in silence, absorbing the truth behind Martin's words, before Martin disappears back into the night. The following day, they arrive at the estate of Lord Kilmichael, the man who controls both the economy and the law in the region. His power is nearly absolute, operating under the authority of the British Crown, allowing him to act without consequence against the lower class. Hannah and Pope warn him that Martin is coming, but the Lord remains calm, confident in the soldiers surrounding him, ready to protect his life and his wealth. Elsewhere, Hoobs is tending to the horses when he notices a group of starving Irish people gathered outside the gates, barely holding on to life. From a brief exchange with a guard, he learns that Lord Kilmichael is preparing to send shipments of grain to England. The realization shocks him. While people here are dying, food is still being taken away. In that moment, Hoobs can no longer ignore what he is seeing. His conscience takes over. He overpowers the guard and tries to force the gates open so the starving crowd can finally eat. But before anything can change, gunfire erupts. Hoobs is shot down and killed where he stands. Despite this, Lord Kilmichael remains determined to move the grain to England. The wagons roll out under heavy guard, while desperate villagers follow behind, picking up whatever scattered grains fall along the way. Meanwhile, his estate remains protected by soldiers and police. Inside the armored carriage, Hannah and Pope are confident that Martin has no way of reaching them. The group eventually arrives in Dublin and settles into an inn before heading to the port. Security is tight, and the guards are fully prepared to protect the Lord at all costs. That night, the calm is shattered. A guard is found dead, and Martin manages to slip inside unnoticed. He makes his way into the Lord's room, but it is a trap. Pope is waiting, and Martin is quickly overpowered. Pope demands that Hannah finish it, but something has changed. Hannah no longer sees Martin as the enemy. In a sudden turn, he switches sides, takes control of the situation, and gives Martin the chance to escape. Because of that betrayal, Hannah is captured and brutally punished by the Lord's men. The next day, they return to the estate, continuing their search for Martin. Not long after, Hannah is brought out for execution. As the soldiers prepare to carry it out, a sudden gunshot cuts through the moment. Martin has returned. He takes down one of the executioners, throwing everything into chaos and forcing the soldiers into confusion. Moments later, a figure rides in on horseback, cloaked in black, drawing the attention of every soldier. Gunfire rains down, and the rider falls. For a brief moment, it seems like Martin is dead. But when the soldiers approach the body, the truth is revealed. The man they shot is not Martin, but Lord Kilmichael himself. At the same time, the starving villagers break through the gates, desperate for food. Amid the chaos, Martin fights alone against the guards, taking them down one by one. He eliminates the gatekeeper and even manages to shoot Pope. With the defenses broken, the villagers storm the food storage. Inside, Connor and Hannah help distribute the supplies, making sure the starving people finally get what they need. Meanwhile, Martin is shot by a sergeant, leading to a final confrontation. He manages to take the man down, but soon finds himself surrounded. Hannah arrives just in time to help him, but Pope, still alive despite his wounds, fires one last shot and hits Martin. Already close to death, Pope collapses shortly after, unable to continue. In the end, the food is taken and shared among the people. The remaining British soldiers retreat, carrying the body of their fallen lord back to Britain. The story closes with Martin hiding on a quiet hillside. With his final strength, he asks Hannah to leave for America and find a new life. Not long after, Martin dies from his wounds. But in the end, he is not remembered as a traitor. He is remembered as a man who stood for his people, a fighter who gave everything for the starving and the forgotten. So the moral of the story is sometimes the world breaks the kindest people first, and by the time they finally fight back, they have already lost everything they were trying to protect.